Okay, so I'm here with Frankie. Thanks for taking your time. Could you introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
So yes, I'm Frankie Thielen. I'm a biologist, and I specialize on more or less on fresh water, and there in particular on freshwater fish parasites. So I did my PhD thesis on freshwater parasites. But since 2007, I work for an NGO called Natur en Umwelt, Fondation Hëllef Natur, so Nature and Environment. It's a foundation, Help for Nature. We are located in Luxembourg, and our foundation exists since 40 years. And we are trying to save and conserve biodiversity here in Luxembourg.
Thank you. So maybe you can also tell us more about your journey in general, how you ended up at this NGO after your PhD, or what motivated you to do this kind of
Well,
work?
actually, the position which was open at the NGO at that time was a project for the conservation of the freshwater pearl mussel.
Mhm.
So the freshwater pearl mussel has a complex life cycle, so it needs a fish to reproduce. So partly the fish are parasitized by the mussel. And as anyhow, I came from the fish parasitology and was always interested in freshwater and fish and so on. That was more or less the perfect position for me to start right after or almost right after the PhD.
Mhm.
Yes, and then my first task was really to establish a rearing or breeding facility to culture these animals here in Luxembourg.
Okay, and how did that go?
Well, of course, culture of endangered freshwater mussels in Europe overall was really scarce. At that time, there was one person from East Germany or from the Czech Republic who started in this direction, and then we took contact with them, learned how they started. But then really quick, I also took contact with people abroad, so especially from the United States, where there's a quite high diversity of freshwater bivalves, and some people there already cultured animals for some period. So at the beginning we did a lot of exchange and quickly
Mhm.
learned how to manage and
Mhm. So it was quite new, and
do
you had
this.
to kind of like collect information on how other people were
Yeah, that was
conserving.
really useful to be in contact with people who already worked in this field than rather start from the beginning. So
Yeah.
the Czech and German people helped us a lot, but then with new insight and knowledge from the people from the US, we involved quite quickly.
Were there any challenges that you faced during the implementation?
Of course, those animals are really sensible, so you need your fish. The fish needs to be healthy. You need to have a facility to keep your fish. So the first year was actually more or less there to build this facility and to
Mm.
get it running. But once we had that all done, it was quite easy to collect juveniles. But what was more challenging was to keep them alive, or at least alive for a long period in the facility, because they grow really slow and you need to get them to a certain size before you can release them. So, and that was challenging and is still a little bit challenging to get them inside in the facility to this size before you can release them.
And so this project is already over.
There was one live nature project for the freshwater pearl mussel. So, and part of it was building this breeding
Mhm.
facility. Other parts of it was river restoration or habitat restoration. After that, there was a second life for the thick-shelled river mussel, so Uniocrossus. And also here, was the breeding facility was already in place, but we needed also to try to culture this animal. And here again, many aspects also deals with river restoration or habitat restoration.
Mhm.
Because it's not enough to culture these animals and to release them. I mean, if your habitats are not all right,
Yeah.
they might survive for some time, but sooner or later they will be lost again. So the most important still is to get the habitats ready before you release these animals. So
Yeah, definitely. Do you have other projects that you're involved in right now?
our NGO was involved in another larger life project for river restoration of the River Alzette in the south of Luxembourg. Then one of our main topics at the NGO is to buy land. So
Ah,
we are owner of almost 2,000 hectare land
interesting.
here in Luxembourg. And we often get land which is not used by intensive forestry agriculture anymore.
Mhm.
And that's often small valleys which are too far away from the farm, too wet, too steep. But those are often habitat or land which is still in a quite good condition concerning biodiversity. In buying those, sometimes we also get the possibility to, together with water administration, to realize re-meandering or other river restoration project. So
Okay,
we
so
have
you're buying land that's basically not used for what it was meant to be used for by whoever owns it.
it's land which people want to sell us, or we try
Yeah,
really to buy it
yeah.
because it's a little bit like a puzzle, and often these little valleys in the Ardennes region are not used anymore,
Hmm.
either by agriculture or by forestry. So it's for us more easy to get these plots
Yep.
and then to do really concrete river restoration measures. So
Cool. Because I've heard a lot of times that the land use can be the one limiting factor for restoration work, since restoration needs quite a lot of space. And you have conflicting interests of people using it for agriculture, for example, but then you have the NGOs or water authorities who would want to implement something, and then that's why the conflict happens. And then now you're coming from the other direction of saying like there are people who want to get like sell their land and you're the one buying it to do the restoration work.
yes, I mean, if we are the owner, it's much more easy
Yeah.
for to continue. But of course, these are more small restoration. So we talk about a few hundred meter to 1 kilometer, maybe 2 kilometers.
Okay.
It's not that we talk here about 10 kilometers of a
Yeah.
river stretch. So it's
Yeah.
more smaller, but it's normally it's an area where the stream or the little creek got straightened, and then we put it more or less back in the old riverbed where it used to be.
Hmm. And this is then financed by national
It's
funds?
financed by national funds. So we have a water fund which is mostly paying for these works.
Okay. And then therefore you can just plan your things and implement
Well,
it quite
normally
easily.
we work together with engineers or planning bureaus who are technically perfect to do those things.
Hmm.
We do
Hmm.
not normally we are involved from the beginning to the end. So normally there's a pre-monitoring. Then we have this bureau who is doing the drawing and the measurement
Yep.
and calculating. And then we are in contact with the water administration to organize the funding.
Hmm.
Once this is all done, then the implementation can start. But a process like that normally takes about 5 years sometimes.
Yeah. And is it easy to acquire funding?
Well, Luxembourg, as all European countries, is involved in the Water Framework Directive, and our water administration is really happy if they get the opportunity to do some restoration work. And here for them, it's also easy because we are allowing them to use our land to do
Mm.
this restoration. If they do it in other spots, it's as you said, there are many stakeholders, often
Yeah.
farmers, forestry, who have more problems in providing land to do this restoration work.
Hmm. But you also said life projects are also some sort of funding that you can.
Yes, yes. So our NGO works no well normally every year, not every year, but we normally have one live or two live projects running. So the one with mussels, the six-shot river mussel and the pearl mussels are over,
Mhm.
but normally you also have these afterlife programs.
Yeah.
So to get so we still continue breeding these animals. So with funding from these afterlife projects, but also we also breed animals for the Eifel-Ardennes region. So we work together with the colleagues from the German side and from the
Mhm.
Belgian side. So they also want us to produce mussels for their rivers. So we do it for them, and they pay us to do that, of course.
Also, there's a lot of collaboration happening between the countries itself.
Yeah, at least in this area.
Yeah, and that's working quite well. I mean,
Yeah,
Luxembourg
yeah,
is
that's
quite a small
working quite
country.
well.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Maybe to get into like a more broader aspect, if you could say some of the challenges that you've experienced when implementing restoration projects, um, what would be your main challenges? And maybe also some, if we talk about challenges, we can also talk about the positive things of like challenges, but also opportunities of freshwater restoration, what you've experienced.
The mussel project, so the mussels are normally located in a little bit larger stream, having a catchment of a few hundred square kilometers. And as the pearl mussels, for instance, need trout, we also had yeah, to open smaller creeks for the trouts to move upwards to reach their spawning grounds. Well, then, of course, you need to remove these obstacles. You again need to talk to all the landowners and so on and so on. So, but I have to say, within these live projects, it's quite complicated to organize them. But then once they are running, the first year is always difficult to get in touch with all the stakeholders. But once that's good, you can really start to do your things, either obstacle removing, river restoration, and so on. But the big challenge is what I saw in this catchment from a few hundred square kilometers. So you do good things and they really work good. So removing this obstacle, 1 year later, you go back and do electrofishing and you see your trouts already moved upstream. So your realization was good. But one big problem was also reducing fine sediment input and nutrient input into the river. So we had a lot of fencing so that cattle does not reach the streams anymore, cattle bridges, watering places, and so on. But what's challenging is really to keep these positive things ongoing for the future.
Yeah.
Sometimes within your catchment, due to politics and agro-politics, there's a lot of intensification again in other parts of your catchment, which partly sometimes destroy your good things you were doing. And that's really challenging. So and like always, you need to yeah to keep optimistic and try to continue this lobbying for the freshwater, and that's a never-ending story, more or less.
Yeah. So maybe now that you've mentioned the government aspect as well, um, do you have any suggestions for the European Commission um, as to measures that might help enable more successful restoration?
Well, of course, if we talk about river restoration, having clean and pristine rivers again, so we normally the best thing is to work in the catchment.
Mhm.
Inside or beside river is nice, but you need to really to work on a catchment scale if you really want to improve things.
Mhm.
And then here, of course, if the European Commission is giving funds for life projects, for instance, for fish, for mussels, or whatever, but in the same time, they also give 10 times funds for intensification of agriculture in the same catchment. That's, of course, counterproductive.
Mm.
And there, of course, the European government but also the national governments really have sometimes to decide in which direction it should go.
Yeah, it sounds quite ambivalent of like funding this, but also funding that, and then
Yeah. If you fund things in a catchment from different funding
mhm.
sources and they go in the same direction, that's nice. But if they go in opposite
Yep.
direction, of course, negative and makes not much sense.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's a good point. Um, Last question. Any key messages for those facing restoration challenges? Any
Well, yeah, even if it's often frustrating, never give up, continue your good work. And we always need really to continue this lobbying and work on and on and on. And really important, what we also do in the life projects, but part also tell the local population, but the overall population, why this is useful. And really it's important that people get to know what these ecosystem services nature provides to us is really worth, and that it's worth to keep this work ongoing. And hopefully one day we do not need to do it anymore because everything
Yeah,
is perfect, but we are far away from that.
sure. So fight and communicate. Okay, thank you. I would stop the